Chapter 1. A Child of the Kingdom. My story began long before I met King Alfred. It started when at the tender age of 18, I attempted to flee from my childhood home. The arrival of dawn signalled my impending bondage to King Alfred, an indentured servitude I yearned to shirk. At that naive age, I was a mere boy riddled with dreams of liberation. The ripple of events my actions would trigger was far beyond my comprehension. But in all honesty, at that moment, my ignorance was my escape. In the shroud of the night, I remember whispering promises to my sister, a vow to return for her. She was a mere child of 6, lacking the maturity to comprehend the magnitude of the decision I was making. All she sensed was a looming separation, a shift in her world order. So she wept, her innocence echoing in her every plea for me to remain. Yet, her heart-wrenching cries, born of an impending abandonment, couldn't alter my course. Her flushed face, imprinted with the terror of my impending departure, haunts me still. Her innocence was still intact. Her fear of solitude with our father was unmistakable. She had valid reasons to dread him, and it's a hard truth to swallow. In my quest for freedom, I was leaving her behind, albeit temporarily, until I could return to rescue her from our life of servitude. I knew she was ill-equipped to brave the open skies alone. I needed to lay a foundation for our life, secure sustenance and shelter before I could attempt to retrieve her. Leaving her wasn't a choice I made lightly, but a necessity born out of our desperate circumstances. Exiting her room, I carefully slipped out of my boots, mindful of the resounding echoes they would create against the hard stone floor. I stealthily descended the stairwell, my heart pounding in sync with each silent step. At the bottom, my gaze fell upon my father, unconscious and sprawled over the kitchen table, his snores a discordant melody in the otherwise silent house. His drunken stupor presented me with the perfect chance to vanish before his intoxication wore thin, and he woke to my absence. In my mind, the path ahead was clear. Traverse through the door, across our lands to the haven where I had hidden my handmade raft amidst the silky reeds to shield it from prying eyes. My plan was to cast off into the bay, towards the unclaimed island of Philpotts that stood desolate yet inviting. I dreamt of a solitary life there, one devoid of the servitude that now chased after me. I was a fool, a child really, who hadn't given thought to the future. Long-term goals were beyond the scope of my imagination. Escape from the shackles of my current predicament seemed satisfying enough. Little did I know that the world, with all its complexities, was waiting to swallow me whole. With trepidation, I approached the imposing entryway to our castle, every intention of mine centered on the need for silence. However, the years had not been kind to the door's hinges. Neglect had dried them out, causing a piercing squeal to reverberate through the stone hallways as I dared to inch the wooden portal open. The raucous noise jolted my father from his inebriated stupor. I stole a fleeting glance towards him, his dishevelled form now upright on the table, his face a palette of confusion and frustration. But I didn't linger. There was no room for verbal exchanges. I bolted, terror fueling my escape. I sprinted through the castle's open gate, past the familiar silhouette of the barn. I veered left towards a field overrun with wild reeds, their vibrant green stalks crowned with gold towering over any man. As I plunged into the field, the concealed terrain beneath the vegetation betrayed my bare feet, a muddled mix of slush and mud, a testament to the previous evening's rainfall. Each gasping breath became a shrill cry from my chest, my heart pounding an urgent rhythm against my ribcage. I wasn't fatigued. It was the searing surge of adrenaline and the dread of possible recapture that spurred me on. But my hurried flight was not without its follies. One false step, a slip on the treacherous ground, sent me sprawling face first into the shallow fringes of Aushermits Bay. The lion-adorned dagger I'd carried as a token of defense flew from my grasp, surrendering itself to the aquatic depths. I lay prostrate, smeared in a layer of thick mud, my gaze locked onto the velvet blackness of the midnight sky. But my respite was short-lived. The furious echo of my father's voice cut through the tranquility, his furious cries of, "Beornwulf, get your ass over here," only 50 paces behind. Fear turned my blood to ice. My well-laid plans were unraveling, and fate was gaining ground on my botched escape attempt. The voice in my head screamed at me to surrender, to turn back and face the inescapable reality, but I vehemently slammed that door shut. I was not ready to capitulate. Gathering what remained of my resolve, I inhaled a shaky breath and tensed my body, preparing to spring up and resume my run. However, before I could execute my resolve, a hand, my father's, emerged from the darkness, latching onto my shirt and wrenching me upwards. His snarl was a contorted mask of rage, his bloodshot eyes bore into mine, and his fingers, cold and unyielding, clung to my shirt as a viper secures its prey. I struggled against his iron grip, but his patience had evaporated. A sudden slap rang across my face, stinging my cheek and sending hot tears cascading down my face. I could see he expected compliance, a broken spirit, but I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. I wrestled against his hold, each wrenching tug a desperate plea for the freedom that was slipping from my grasp. "Calm down, boy!" my father roared, his words punctuated by a spray of spit. I could see him battling the fury that threatened to consume him, the rage that had ignited at my audacity, and perhaps the disruption of his alcohol-induced reprieve. Regardless, I continued to resist, trading the dignity of respect for the intoxicating allure of freedom. My fist swung in desperation, landing a direct hit on his unyielding eye. Yet, my violence was met with a disconcerting nonchalance. My blows did not faze him. I strained against his vice-like grip once more, only to hear the fabric of my shirt rip under his formidable strength. But just as I tasted the sweet relief of liberty, it was ripped away as he encircled me in a crushing bear hug, draining the strength from my body and stealing the breath from my lungs. I recall that moment with vivid clarity, the moment when I surrendered my dreams to the chilling void of defeat, an emotion so profound and soul-shattering that I vowed never to succumb to it again. Eventually, my father's grip slackened and I stumbled backward, the threatening darkness of the bay yawning behind me. Perhaps he'd seen the resignation in my slumped shoulders and heard the ragged rhythm of my shallow breaths, but at that moment I questioned whether my existence even mattered to him. I had sunk to my knees, studying the hands that would soon be fettered. I sucked in a deep, shuddering breath, feeling the heat of humiliation burn across my face, and fixed my gaze on my father's mud-encrusted boots, too ashamed to meet his eyes. He was the victor, I was merely his subservient. I waited, heart pounding in dreaded anticipation of the inevitable reprisal. His words echoed in my mind, a mantra of inevitability. You cannot escape your duty, and if you try to flee from it, then justice will make you remember your loyalty. Pain and death are the only two forms of escape in this world. Remember that, boy. With eyes clenched shut, I prepared for the impending blow, hoping it would be potent enough to cast me into oblivion. But for reasons unknown, my father's wrath lay dormant that day. Instead, he seized my arms and squatted in the muck, aligning his gaze with mine. "I know you are afraid," he uttered, shaking his head. For the first time, I saw a glimmer of sadness in his eyes. "I am too, if I am being honest, but you are honor-bound as my firstborn to go to the academy and fight for our king, Alfred. Now is the time to grow up and be a man. It is time, son, to let this be your only taste of defeat, or I will never see you again. I fear that result, and I do not want to dig your grave like I dug your—" His voice trailed off, his unfinished sentence hanging heavily in the air, but I knew the unspoken words were, "like I dug your mother's." I fought the urge to break down and weep. A solitary tear coursed down my father's cheek, an unprecedented display of vulnerability from Harold. Not even at my mother's funeral had I witnessed such emotion. My father, a decorated veteran in King Alfred's army for nearly 3 decades, bore his battle scars with stoic pride, his maimed left hand a tangible testament to his service. Despite his intimidating reputation and the dread he instilled in me, I harbored no resentment for him. I simply struggled to forgive the man he had become, a man seemingly incapable of love. Looking at my father, I voiced the questions that had been tormenting me. "Why are you doing this to me? Why would you send your only son to go off and die for a king you hate?" His reaction was immediate and fierce. His face reddened, and he shook his head vehemently. "The only thing I hate is cowards, and you are acting like one. I was sent to the academy when I was your age, and I did my duty." His words brought to mind the stern face of my grandfather, Beornwulf I. Despite his age and the weariness etched deep in his lines, he had never experienced the torment of being torn away from his home in chains. He was a third-born son to a fisherman and was never forced into servitude. "Let us go. Your freedom ends today, and a new chapter begins. I hope you survive it." His words echoed with a finality that echoed in my chest, amplifying the dread that already swelled within me. My father, the Baron, seized me by the arm, his grip cold and unyielding, and began to lead me back to Auschwitz, our tranquil hamlet of a single tavern and a handful of homesteads. As his hands locked around me, I felt a numbness trickle down my arm, like the icy fingers of winter reaching through the gaps in our frail walls. The Baron, a man burdened by the weight of his title, shirked his responsibilities, leaving his people to fend for themselves. In the lean winters, the villagers, with gaunt faces and vacant eyes, would scrounge and hunt for their sustenance. Our once vibrant village was now a skeletal husk of its former self, and the people earned the scorn of the urban sophisticates. The latter hurled insults at us, calling us inbred savages that deserved a brutal death for allowing our town to languish in oblivion. The castle, my father's looming fortress, stood tall amidst the decay, a hollow relic from better times. Ever since my mother's demise, it had been left abandoned, its gate unguarded, its gardens overgrown and unruly. It had transformed from a sanctuary into a prison, a grim reminder of the shame our Baron had brought upon our king. As we neared the shadow of the castle, my father gestured toward my horse, the old steed I had named Arrow after a summer of shared companionship. The sight of my father's sword, its raven emblem flickering ominously in the torchlight, seared into my memory. I felt the pain of that moment, sharp as a knife, sinking deep into my heart to a place where time could not erode it. Hesitantly, I mounted Arrow, running my hands gently along his neck. "This is probably our last ride, old friend," I murmured. "But fear not, my sister will look after you." As the torchlight danced on my father's sword, now secured at his hip, I spurred Arrow on, plunging into the shivering cold of the night. It felt akin to tearing off a blood-crusted bandage, swift, sharp, and over before you realized what happened. We journeyed on, swallowed by the silence of the night, punctuated only by the haunting song of the crickets and the rhythmic clopping of the horses' hooves on the leaf-carpeted forest floor. The moon, like a distant lantern, kept watch as we navigated through the obscurity of Annandale Forest en route to the legendary 7th Ravens Academy. I wasn't a warrior. I was a boy unversed in the art of the sword, unaccustomed to the throes of combat. Yet, I was resigned to what lay ahead. A warrior's death at the hands of a more skilled adversary. An odd sense of peace overtook me at the thought. A peaceful surrender to the unknown. Maybe, beyond the sun, I would find new worlds, new frontiers to explore. Perhaps there, I could find a place that felt like home, where the people radiated warmth and kindness like my mother used to. In the oppressive darkness, my father abruptly raised his hand, compelling me to rein in Arrow. The old horse resisted, uncomfortable in this unfamiliar, foreboding forest. I mirrored his unease, but endeavored to cast an illusion of resilience. I vowed not to taste defeat twice and clung to that notion as my father broke the oppressive silence. His voice pierced the hush, jolting my heart into a frantic beat. "The academy is up ahead, about a mile. You proceed alone now. Dismount," he commanded. My eyes scanned the inky blackness, conjuring terrifying visions of unseen predators. My father's words, attempting to instill strength, were a mere whisper. "Remember to hold your shield high and the blade firm in your hand. Remember, our strength is our loyalty. It may save your life someday." I was too drained to argue or protest against the solitary path he forced upon me. As I dismounted, my father locked his gaze on me one last time. The moonlight painted an eerie sheen on his eyes before he led Arrow away, disappearing into the enveloping darkness. I longed to surrender to my tears, grief threatening to engulf me, but I fought it back. Steadying myself, I took the first steps toward the looming unknown, fully aware of the irrevocable change that was imminent. Slowly, I trudged through the muck of the path leading to the 7th Ravens Academy. An ancient village gradually materialized in the darkness. Humble, worn structures punctuated by a protective stone wall, it was simplicity encapsulated. The intimidating sight of 2 massive torches casting an eerie glow from the entry gate, the light flickering and dancing amongst the leaves and casting long phantom shadows, only heightened my trepidation. As I neared the gate, I noticed the aged banner bearing the image of the raven, a stark red against a black backdrop, the king's insignia for his guard. Intended to incite fear, it had always appeared slightly comical to me, the raven with a goofy look on his face seemingly in flight towards the sun, our god and eternal sanctuary. However, I was in no mood to laugh. The deafening silence, the disturbing tranquility of the night, was unnerving, stirring the gooseflesh on my arms. The unsettling sense of being watched, despite the apparent absence of any life, gnawed at my already frayed nerves. Suddenly, a voice cut through the silence, startling me. Turning, I found a boy, tanned, with a square jaw, cropped hair, and considerably overweight. "Are you a recruit?" he asked, his torch casting a shower of ash over his hair. "I am. I'm Beornwulf of Arctophos. And you?" I asked, noticing his trembling lip. Leofwig of Harper's Rule," he managed. I remembered my father telling me about Harper's Rule. Evidently, it was a land of barbarians formed under King Alfred III's reign after the War of Occupation. Supposedly, these barbarians travelled to our lands by boat in the year of Lord 989, seeking treasure, glory, and farmland. For the next 10 years, there were many battles between our 2 people, and eventually, King Alfred and the barbarian King Guthrum created a treaty. In it, the barbarians were given fertile land, but in exchange, they were required to serve the crown. It is said that both sides claimed their victory from King Alfred's treaty, as the barbarians got their glory and treasures, and we received our peace. Even though a peace treaty exists between us today, it is still widely known that the barbarians hold on to their barbaric ways. People even say that their village elders routinely sacrifice animals to the gods in hopes of bringing about a new barbarian king that would have the courage to usurp the throne. Everyone knew they were a bloodthirsty people, and though they had been tamed for a time, there would come a day when what the king had given them would no longer be good enough. However, I was staring at a boy with wide, glistening eyes that said he was no barbarian, and therefore I had nothing to fear. "What do we do now?" he asked. His fearful, naive expression stirred a sense of empathy in me. I saw his fear mirrored my own, and I knew I needed to feign strength if only to allay his apprehensions. I had played this game before with my sister, a facade of bravado to shelter her from reality. "We should knock on the gate," I finally replied, leading the way. My heart pounded as I approached the towering wooden gate, standing defiantly at 15 feet. I raised my hand and knocked, then stepped back, waiting, each second stretching out into eternity. As the last of the heartbeats of the night faded, a wooden viewing hole snapped open. Its harsh creak echoed through the silent forest, a sudden interruption to the tranquil hum of nature. A pair of brown eyes, deeply etched with lines of a hard life, stared back at me. "What is the password?" a voice demanded gruffly. Confusion swept through me. A password? The absurdity of the situation caught me off guard. After all, when did one need a password to be sold into servitude? Laughter exploded from behind the gate, slicing through my confusion. The man seemed to revel in my visible bewilderment. "There is no password, you simple weasel. Stand back." His voice was scornful, a dismissive taunt hanging in the air as I complied, taking a single step back. When the gate finally swung open, it revealed 2 men, their brown beards long and unkempt, clad in chainmail armor and Sutton Hoo helmets. They carried long swords reminiscent of the one my father wields, and I felt a pang of longing for home. "Are you 2 going to stand there all day, or will you report to the master?" The voice came from one of the men, his tone dripping with irritation. It was a rhetorical question, a thinly veiled order. He grabbed me by the arm, his grip firm and unyielding, and guided me into the compound. As he pointed to a dilapidated wooden shack, a wave of dread washed over me. It barely looked like it could keep out the rain, let alone the biting winter chill. "Go there!" he ordered, his laughter ringing out cruelly as he gave me a light shove forward. As I approached the decrepit building, I couldn't help but voice my concerns aloud. "What is this place?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. The thought of living here, in this shabby excuse of a shelter, filled me with sinking dread. After absorbing the guard's sneers, I ventured across the threshold into a cavernous, dimly lit room teeming with 50 bunk beds. A single candle on a desk in the corner flickered, casting sporadic shadows. It took all my courage to push past my initial trepidation, each step a struggle more challenging than the last. When I finally halted, my gaze fell upon an elderly man with snow-white hair, dozing in a chair. His head was slumped against the wall, his snores reverberating off the room's wood walls. Treading lightly, I managed to muster a whisper, hoping not to startle him. "Sir!" He drew in a breath, his eyelids fluttering open, and cast an impassive, almost irked glance at Leofwig and me. "I surmised some fathers would eagerly send their offspring away. There, the corner bunk. The sturdier of you should claim the bottom, lest the planks yield and crush the other." I followed his pointed finger to the bunk bed nestled in the corner. A chest lay nearby, and 2 swords propped against the stone wall. "Are these ours to use, sir?" He scratched his chest lazily, pushed himself off his chair, and ambled over to us. "Seems you have a knack for solving mysteries. Yes, those are yours. In the chest, you'll find a change of clothes. As for the swords, they are to remain at your side. You may call me Master Ulfric. Until your demise or your reassignment, I am to be your overseer." "Understood, sir. What would you have us do?" Master Ulfric chuckled. "Dutiful already? Good. That trait will serve you well here. What might your name be, lad?" "Beornwulf of Aushermits, sir." "And your sizable companion?" "Leofwig of Harper's Rule. Though you share no blood, here you will develop a brotherly bond, be it in life, in training, as allies, or even as adversaries." Master Ulfric cleared his throat. "As for my orders, dress and await the other recruits. Training commences an hour past dawn. Be prepared. The day will be grueling, and by its end one may have met their end." "Someone might perish today?" Leofwig inquired, his voice fraught with apprehension. "Are casualties during training that common, or is that just town gossip?" Master Ulfric's lips curled into a slight smile at Leofwig's tremulous tone. "The raven's symbol is not granted lightly. Those deemed unworthy are consigned to the heavens. Of my previous class of 100, merely 21 made it to graduation. I hope for a stronger batch this time around. However, if they are of Leofwig's build, there will be many homeward journeys in wooden caskets." Leofwig gulped, words fleeing him. Recognizing his fear, I spoke for him. "We understand your expectations, Master Ulfric, and will strive to meet them." I placed a comforting hand on Leofwig's shoulder. "We may not be formidable now, but we shall grow." I offered a confident smile, despite my own doubts. Leofwig nodded in agreement. "You're quite prideful, aren't you?" "Not at all, sir." A lengthy, penetrating stare from Master Ulfric made me feel like he was dissecting my very essence. Gradually, his emotionless gaze morphed into a subtle grin. "You're not arrogant, just putting on a brave front. That's good, because the prideful often die first. In due course, we'll see if you're cut out for the battlefield." He winked before ambling back to his chair, leaving us in silence. Drawing in a deep breath, I attempted to quell my nerves. I peered at Leofwig, whose facade couldn't mask his fears. His tears slipped silently down his cheeks. "We have a few hours before dawn. Do you reckon you could sleep?" "Indeed, the journey here has left me weary." "That's good," I nodded. Leofwig furrowed his brow. "You know, Master Ulfric wasn't wrong. My father was all too keen to send me here. I've been travelling for nearly 2 weeks, got lost in the woods a few times, but finally made it. I'm sorry." I struggled to find more comforting words. "No need to blame yourself. The world can be cruel, but thank you for your kindness and bravery today." Had I not encountered you in the forest, I'm unsure what I'd have done. Aye. Leofwig gave me one last look, lay on the bottom bunk and closed his eyes. His words struck a chord in me, highlighting that my narrative wasn't the saddest one in the room. Sure, I'd had my share of hardships, but some had it much worse. As I climbed into the top bunk, I was filled with empathy for Leofwig. I also felt a sense of pride in myself. I had displayed courage today, more than I'd ever imagined I possessed, but before I could settle, I needed to address one last matter with my new friend. Leofwig! I hesitated, wondering if he was already asleep, but it was imperative I broached the topic before others arrived. Can you handle a sword? Somewhat. Can I trust you? I leaned over my bed, peering at Leofwig, his back turned towards me. Death looms here, and no assurances promise our survival, but having a friend might make it bearable. I'll watch your back if you watch mine. Leofwig rolled over and looked up at me. Sounds good, friend, Beornwulf. I returned his smile. My friends call me Beorn. He reciprocated my smile, and I laid back on my bunk, a hopeful thought settling in as I drifted off to sleep, unsure of what the new day would bring. Perhaps we'll be all right.